part 2 here. So if I was to say, I could doubt, I could question, I could speculate against, offer other suggestions of what it might be. But if I say, okay, let's take the postulate of, let's say the Mishkan pattern is the structure of the vow. When Yahuwah says in Leviticus 23, these are my moedi, ayin dalet, mem vav, ayin dalet yod, mem prefix, vav wild card, ayin dalet, yod suffix means my personal, so ayin dalet, witness and testimony, yes, but Eddie, ayin dalet yod is also bejewelment, ornamentation. This is my adornment, my choice, best treasure. This is my stuff. Therefore, to disregard the Moedim is to say he's not your Elohim, or his stuff is bunk to you. You're going to replace it with something that he said don't do, like Christmas, Easter, Halloween, Sunday, whatever it is. You, by doing that, are disavowing his identity, his heart, his concerns. And so when you get that, you realize, I must return to the Moedim. And until Israel returns to the Moedim, well, then who is Israel? His people. With an eternal covenant forever. Oh, we have a new, better covenant. There may be something to having a covenant based on believing in Yeshua, but that's not my concern at the moment. My concern is, he said Israel is Ami, Ayin Mem Yod, my people, and I will be Eloheka, Aleph Lamed Hey Yod Kaf, your deity, Elohim. How do you want it? What word would you rather plug in? You want to plug in the word God? That's a perverted word. You can use it if you want, but Elohim is powerful champion, provider, creator of the heavens and the earth, who said that he'd heal you and strengthen you and give you everything. If you want to have the benefits of the covenant, of the vow, you've got to go back to the terms of the vow. And for us to say, I will be your people. And he says, if you're my people, you must, your prerequisite, your requirement to sustain the status of being my people is you sit down on Shabbat and you keep these Moedim. So for somebody to come along and a couple hundred years after Yeshua was on the face of the earth and say, oh no, the way to be his people is to not do the Moedim and work on Shabbat, so where you must not work on the day following Shabbat, we're going to change it to prove that we are different than that. But now we are going to usurp the position of the righteous, the holy, the pure, the just. No, you're not. You're everything opposite that. That makes you a liar. That makes you a son of the devil, because the devil's the father of lies. So how can the structure that claims to be the holy circus be the manifestation of the father of lies? And if you don't see it, you don't see it. If you do see it, you do see it. And if the people don't want to see it, then there's not going to be any argument. So Daniel was told, Bet Mem Resh Aleph Hey, in the condition of Mem, those who want to see, write something up and put it into the aspect of those who will see, those who are willing to understand the staging, the bima, of what Elohim will allow us to see, Resh Aleph Hey. To understand the staging is to see, in my estimation, is to see the Aleph Bet, to see the Mishkan pattern. That's what it is, by definition, right there, by definition. Well, but see, if you didn't have a regard of the meaning of the letters, if you didn't have a regard of the spelling of words, if you didn't have a regard of the fact that there's this Aleph Bet saying that we're going to be locked up in the diaspora, being dominated by our enemy oppressors, just like Yeshua in the grave, for 2,730 years, Ephraim, northern kingdom, lost 10 tribes. And then there's a moment of resurrection, an occasion of Pei-Zadi, the mouth blossoming like a detonation explosion. Well, then you wouldn't get it. You have to see that to see that. And when you see that, you can't pick up all the pieces and stuff them back in and say, oh, go back into your little obscure obfuscation of ignorance. Because that ignorance isn't bliss, that's oppression. Like being in Egypt. And so the picture of the Exodus blowing out is a picture of the resurrection. And he says there's going to be another greater Exodus. That's what he promised. But if we think, oh no, there's going to be a rapture, the rapture could be a picture of this other Exodus. But the other Exodus that's talked about, that Monty Judah talks about, he's the guy who coined the phrase, the greater Exodus, that I'd ever heard, is us going back to the land. It's not us flying up into the heavens. Well, who came up with flying up into the heavens? Well, it's written in the scripture, in the New Testament. Is it? Well, you have to say, figure it out, but it's kind of sort of there. At least they tell us it's kind of sort of there. But what's really there? If I use the Mishkan pattern to see what's really there, if I use the alphabet as a model to see what's really there, which is what I'm suggesting we do for the book of Revelation here, then it's like, okay, how does that work? So I'm going to exercise a little bit of how that works. Now, this is just me exercising how that works. And somebody else could say, I don't see it that way. Okay, then see it your own way. I don't care. Do whatever you want. This is just an exercise of contemplation, of meditation, of consideration, call it speculation if you want. So one of the things, just before applying these matters to 7 churches in Revelation, right at the very beginning, one of the matters that I had looked at many years ago, when I wrote up that here, this chart was the meta. I was saying, how does Aleph become Bet? What's the nature of the change? How does Bet become Gimel? What's the nature of the change of, if there's something which goes through a morphing of phases, and then there's different words here which seem to epitomize that. But there's another way to read the Aleph Bet that I'm suggesting. I mentioned this, I believe, back in the eriktology class, but I haven't talked about it really, but I'll mention it again here. If I look at Aleph as being a chad, and then I look at Bet, which is in, on, with, among, through, against, in the condition of, it's, if something's in, on, there's a placement. If Aleph is just echad, is one, is unified, there's no reference of in or out, with or against. It's all just oneness. So Bet is otherness. Once you have an other, you've got, here's one, here, that's the other. And whether the other is with or against, it's otherness. If I'm here, then Bet is not here. Bet is there. But if there's no Bet, I shouldn't even have to say here, because all there is this. So here is a reference kind of to Alephness, but only in regards to the fact that there's a betness of consideration, because if there's no other, there's no way to designate, well. So again, if Aleph is all there is, you can't even call it Aleph, because it's just is. As soon as you say Aleph and you give it a shape, an identity, it designates it as what it is compared to anything that it's not. So you're alluding to Bet, even though you're just drawing Aleph. Draw a picture of an Aleph, or draw the concept in your mind of an Aleph. So there's something about this Alephness is just this state of being, which is kind of like what Ehyeh, Aleph Hey Yod Hey means. It's just I am. Compared to what? Compared to nothing. So you can't even say Ehyeh, because Aleph Hey Yod Hey, Ehyeh, That's the first letter, the fifth letter, the 10th letter, the fifth. As soon as you start putting in other letters with meanings, it means there's otherness. And ehie is this just the oneness of with no otherness. So what's between alephhness and betness? And I'm suggesting that there's a way to read the aleph bet here that you could say, yeah, it's described by the next letter, which is the gimel. So one way to read the aleph bet is that here's aleph and here's bet and then here's gimel. So aleph, like on this kind of chart here, is that, okay, if something goes from the aleph state to the bet state, what just happened? And if you go from the bet state to the gimel state, what does gimel mean? Well, gimel is the verb, like Daniel said, I saw one on this side of the river and that side of the river. It's like if you turn your head, your head has to gimel back and forth to see the two sides of the river. If I make it extreme, if it's out there. How do you see? But if gimel is actually a type of description of what's between aleph and bet, then if I say, well, if aleph is the mouth and bet is the stomach, the gimel is the esophagus, the throat, between aleph and bet. Bet's an ox. What do you mean, mouth? See, it all depends on how you choose to see it. So if I say aleph is achad and bet means other, like an independent autonomy, well, if aleph bet is father and bet nun is son, ab is not just the word father, but it also is like abib, springtime, verter, youthful vigor. Whoa, but youth, that should be like bet nun, the son. Yeah, but see, is it father or is it youth? It doesn't matter. It's not. It's the concepts associated. So if aleph bet is to have a passionate desire to do something, it's like the archer who says, hey, I'm going to see if I can, or the guy throwing a rock, I'm going to see if I can throw a rock and hit that pool of water way out in the distance. Hey, man, it's splashing. The idea that you can imagine, have a plan, pick up an object, calculate, throw or shoot, that's all the aleph position of I am, I will. What's bet? Somebody else saying I am, I will. And what if that conflicts with your authority? Well, do what I say. Well, now that's aleph usurping his authority over the bet. But the bet says, no way, man, I'm an aleph too. And so is bet actually a type of aleph? Yeah. So then how do you read what these letters are? They're concepts of structure that you have to contemplate to understand in order to then bet mem resh aleph hey. I'm saying that the key to understanding the whole thing is right there in Daniel 9:23. What Daniel was told to do regarding these matters that he was then shown regarding the Shin Bet Ayin Yod Mem, Shin Bet Ayin Yod Mem, is this. And so I'm suggesting this outrageous concept that us studying this alphabet, this eriktology thing, is doing the same thing Daniel was empowered to do by Archangel Gabriel. That's a pretty outrageous statement. But then how do you do that? It's by doing it on your own of pondering. But here, I'll try to give you some steps of this here. So if I say, if aleph is achad and bet is this otherness of an independent autonomy, and if gimel is the relationship between the two, then gimel is a type of yoke. The word ayin lamed is a yoke. The word aleph tav is a yoke. But the gimel is this esophagus, this throat, this connector between the mouth and the stomach. What's the nature of the relationship between the Father and the Son, between these two autonomous, between the source granting the being of otherness and thus the autonomy that other is allowed to have? What's the subject or the nature of, or the dynamic of the relationship? If the relationship itself is just the fact that there's a relationship, that's the gimel. But then if I'm going to say, well, what's the relationship compared to that other? Well, that's answered by Dalet. Then I could say, well, if I contemplate these letters, what's between aleph and bet is gimel. What's between bet and gimel is Dalet. What's between Gimel and Dalet is Hey. What's between Dalet and Hey is Vav. So just pondering, beaning. And if I do that, I'll just read through a bit. Because instead of Aleph and Bet being right next to each other, and then Gimel's the next in a sequence, and then Dalet's the next in a sequence, and Hey is the next in a sequence, it's another aspect of this alphabet where, let's say Aleph and Bet are over here. And then Gimel is what's between. Okay, then what's between Gimel and Bet? Dalet. What's between Gimel and Dalet? Hey. What's between Hey and Dalet? Vav. It's narrowing down to finding what's the upshot of it all. What's at the pinnacle? And is it the base, or is it the vertex? Is it up at the top? But what's between the Gimel and the Bet would be, what is this self? If the self, like the prodigal son or the obedient son, see, the tether is you're an independent operator. You've got your own autonomy of Alephness, even though you're the Bet compared to the Aleph. Okay, but then you're given this idea of a son, of obedience. And remember what the voice of Elohim said to Yeshua when he's getting baptized? This is my Ben Dodi, beloved son, in whom I'm well pleased. Listen to him. This affirmation. It's possible for us as Israel, it's possible for us as who we are as an individual to have the same heart, to have the same mind, to have the same relationship. Because Yeshua wasn't, I can only do this, I'm the superstar, nobody else can walk in my ways. He said, follow me, walk in my steps, be just like me, I'll show you how to do this. We should be able to hear those same words said about us. We're given options as if Aleph was here and Bet was there, and we're saying how many phases in between belligerent, obnoxious, alienated son versus obedient son. What's the gray? The word gray, gradient, gray tones is a scale of in between, of a spectrum, like an airbrushed going from white to black, say. The gradient in between is like frequencies between two sounds of high and low. How many frequencies? The slightest incremental difference in a frequency is a different note. The slightest, one little smallest measurement is a different color, even though it looks exactly the same. It's a difference. So there's this huge gradient, and so Dalet is this decision that we can modify who we are by any one of those determinations. Of all tether, the yoke options, he tells us this is what is preferred by Elohim. That's the Hey between the Gimel and the Dalet. Then the full span, the scope of options, Elohim built for the human experience. In other words, you can't have a thought that he didn't already design. You can't have a feeling he didn't design Adam to have. You can't have the slightest little, hey, why? Whatever it is, he designed the whole thing. Every little face muscle, if you do an animated film, they've got a few extremes. Why? Hey. Yeah, but he's also put in everybody's head. When you see somebody make that face, you know exactly what they mean. Why is that? It's interesting that he designed face muscles with meaning as if it was a language. Hand gestures also, Stan Tennant was studying that. But he designed all that. It's a set group. It's not an endless eternal thing. He designed, we just don't know the expanse. People study facial characteristics. There's a movie, a TV show, I forget what it's called, but it was about somebody who could read faces and tell what's going on, work for the cops. The more facial manipulations characteristics, you could plug it into a film, plug it into an animated where you draw the picture of somebody's face, and you can read it. But you see, he designed all that. He designed every attitude for us to have regarding him and his stuff. He knows what they are. And then he somehow came down here to experience it, to wear that Adam suit. Amazing concept. And some people say, he couldn't have done that. He wouldn't have done that. God wouldn't have become a man. And it's like, why not? If he designs this place and sticks Adam there and says, hey, I'm gonna come do that just because. It's like, I want to go on vacation in the Bahamas or, Antarctica. Why? Well, just because. He builds a place, he sets it up, and he decides to figure out how to do it where he can have that experience. I don't hold that against him. Why not? What the heck? What else are you going to do? You can do anything you want. Why not do that? What do you make of that is a whole different matter. The point is, for the Bet son independent autonomy to say, I'm going to determine what he said he wants us to do, and then I'm going to do that. That's voving. That's taking a hold and securing the suggestion of this is how to be the preferred son. Okay. And then to implement with intent. So the idea of Zion, identification unto eternity, how does one live as being a self on purpose? And I'm suggesting then that the letter Zion is answering what's between the He and the Vav. And then the letter Het, what's between the Vav and the Zion. This could conceptually wise become a little convoluted or distorted. I'm going to go through a little faster now. I tried to establish a pattern there with the first 7, just to say where does this go in trying to apply the Mishkan pattern to the book of Revelation. So here, if I look at Het as being what's between Vav and Zion, in or out, sheep or goats, wheat or tares, known or unknown. Yeshua's going to say one day, I never knew you. Say, what? You certainly did. We knew you. Come on, man. We walked in your name. We worked at miracles in your name. We cast out devils in your name. But so this Het represents something between choosing to be his people with a certain identification. You've got to have his identification or you're missing out. You're lost. And whether or not you have eternity because you claim his blood, that's a different matter. And God bless you, as they say. I don't want my family and friends to be left out, but Israel has to walk in the ways of Yahuwah, which is the Moedim and the Torah. And he said, if anybody doesn't eat unleavened bread for a week, they're cut off from being his people. Yeah, well, what if they plead the blood of Jesus? Well, you better hope you can play into that other covenant, because he said, if you eat leavened bread for that week intentionally, if somebody slips it to you, I didn't know, maybe it's a different matter, but if you don't do as what he said, walk in his ways, you're cut off from being his people. That's what he said. You can do Lent all you want. You can have Easter ham and say, thank you, Jesus, for giving us this wonderful meal if you want. But he said, whoever eats rodents and pork and go to the gardens are cut off from being his people. Why did he say that if it's not true? If you want to be Israel, if you want to be Ami Israel, his people, Amo, Ayin Mem Vav, Yod is my people, Vav is his people. If you want to be Am Israel, you better find out what he wants and do that. And moderate your behavior, moderate your consciousness on purpose. as per what he said. That's Hey Vav Zion. And then Tet. There was the picture of Yeshua gave the story of the guy who got into the party, and the guy putting on the party says, "Hey, friend, what are you doing here? You don't have the party clothes." And he says, "Well, I just came in. I heard there was a party." And he calls the bouncers and he said, "Grab this guy, bind him hand and foot, and pitch him into the darkness. Get him out of here." What? He's not messing around. So Tet qualifies what's between Zion and Het. Yod qualifying what's between Het and Tet. He says, these are mine. And if you're a worker of iniquity, you're out. Remember what he said? Those who do not get in the book of Revelation, I think it's chapter 15 or something, he says, those who, idolaters, liars, thieves, fornicators, murderers. There's a whole list of 7. They're not getting in. Take that seriously? I plead the blood. No, he didn't say that. He says, if you behave this way, you're not getting in. You're either his or you're a worker of iniquity. And the word iniquity is anomio, which is lawlessness. He said, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. You who do as a standard operating procedure, you're not mine. You can think, you can say the words, you can do certain actions, but if you're not mine, you're not mine. Well, how serious is this? What is his? Well, that's the Torah. That's the letter Kaf. This is mine. Mine Yod, I possess. This is mine, my Torah, that you need to teach and learn. Righteousness, by definition, is keeping the Torah by regard and by action. And the word righteousness, zadikah, also means victory or deliverance and salvation, justice. So you could say those who are mine get salvation, and if you're not mine, you don't get salvation. Well, isn't salvation automatically given by the blood of Jesus? Oh, that's the doctrine. That's the words in English. But then you start looking at some English words that I'm familiar with the verse. I looked in the Aramaic Peshitta here, the Aramaic English New Testament, and then I looked at the Hebrew word and then looked it up in the dictionary, and it's like, oh, it's a little different. Like, for example, for the 7 churches, to he who is victorious, to he who overcomes, I will grant the right to eat of the tree of life in the paradise of Elohim, or he who overcomes, I will grant this or that or the other thing. And then it turns out that word is Zion Kaf Aleph, or Zion Kaf Hey, or Nun Zion Kaf, and it means pure and clean. Pure and clean, Zion Kaf. Well, if I appropriate by the Mishkan pattern that the Zion is the 7th letter, I mean, regarding Sabbath day, and Kaf is the Torah, you mean regarding the Torah. Zion is to cut off or make a stipulation that I'm going to be this people according to the Torah. I'm going to be a Torah person. Well, that's pure and clean. Well, that's an overcomer. That's a victorious one. Not one who says, I believe in Jesus and claim his blood is the forgiveness of my sins. Well, maybe it is, but maybe it's not. Why'd he say Zion Kaf? Now I got to wrestle with that. If he says to the one who is pure and clean, because he's evidencing his purity by shomering, and asah, ayin shin hey-ing, my command and instruction according to the vow, everything Yahweh says we will hear, we will do. He said, keep the Sabbath day, Zion. He said, ponder, learn, meditate on the Torah. Yes, we will. That's Kaf. That one is his who gets redeemed, who gets the victory of salvation, because that's what righteousness is. Well, that's not the Christian church, is it? Yikes. If Lamed describes the Torah, the protocol of what righteousness is, which is between Yod and Kaf, then Mem tells us what's between Kaf and Lamed. This is the Torah, teach and learn. Then Mem is also a picture of the pregnant, internalized seed. You're crossed over. You're not of the same ilk. That's Hebrew. A new creation, a change of state. That's Mem. And Nun, what's between Lamed and Mem, is not limited to theory, but the practical engagement with travail. Not one who takes a science biology class and learns how to get pregnant or what does it mean to be pregnant, but one who is pregnant. You're no longer not Hebrew. You're no longer just studying theology. You've taken his seed, his word, according to what Yeshua said, and it changes you physiologically at your DNA. You're no longer what you were before. If Nun is not limited to theory, but practical engagement with travail, Psalmic real-time practical use for building, each Nun provides a block to build with. If he says, walk in my ways and do what I say, and it's like, it's difficult, I've got a conflict, I've got a struggle, then he has to allow the rest of our life to be a series of events or conditions or opportunities that each time we do what he said, we've built a building block, like a Lego piece. And as our life goes on, piece by piece by piece by piece by piece, we're building this Migdal Or, lighthouse, this tower, this beacon of saying, be his people and spread his word. It's not a matter of necessarily going out into the street and saying, you got to ask Jesus in your heart. There might be something to that, but the way we respond as his people with his word inside of us, doing what he said, not just learning about it, but then given the practical occasion to do what he said. Each time we do it, we're building something unto eternity. So to be his people and build something is going to take a lot of time. Yeah, the thief on the cross, can I get into heaven? Yeah, you betcha, guy. Boom, okay, woo, it's all over. There's something about building event by event, occasion by occasion, moment by moment, word by word, the rest of your life. The longer we're here, the more things we have a chance to build if we do it right. And with his seed, his word, his instruction, his Torah within us, if everything, every time we apply it, every time we do it, every Shabbat we keep, every Moed we regard and do, every hodu we say, every shofar we blow is another building block to build. You know, remember that story, Christian joke. Guy dies, goes to heaven, St. Peter at the gates of pearly gates. Hey, come on in. Woo-hoo, I got a mansion in heaven. And he sees this. Oh, is this mine? No, no. You know, as he goes down the street, you know, the mansions get smaller and smaller. And finally he gets to a cardboard box out in the middle of a field. And he says, here's your mansion. The guy goes, what? There's a ripoff, man. I should be allowed to have one of those mansions like that one I saw out there in the beginning. And he says, you didn't send up any building materials. Send up any building materials. Is that what we're doing? Is that a joke? Or is there some sense of reality? What's the advantage of a longer life? Another day, another chance to do something that he said. Another Hodu Layuaki Tov. Woohoo! I got another feather in my hat for my war bonnet up in heaven. And what? Another ruby in my crown. How does this place work? But if we look at the practical and say, event by event, time by time, circumstance by circumstance, the guy cut you off in the freeway. You little pick a finger, man. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, that's the way we want to behave. How should we behave? Can you ask for Yahweh to bless that guy? He doesn't deserve it. Well, if he deserved it, it wouldn't be grace. It would be earned. Mercy and grace is undeserved. So the people that are most offensive are the ones that we can choose to be graceful and merciful to, and that's a bonus for us. How does this life operate? Well, see, if we're running through this and say, if then everything we do in practical reality, that's the noon. So you see a noon is a prefix, a noon is a suffix. It's to be engaged in the action of doing something. And if every time we do something, it forms a building block which we can build up, that's this somic engineered structure. But the somic is also this tree, and the tree that you plant has to grow, and it develops, it puts out branches, and they strengthen to bear fruit. And then the fruit that's born, remember, said by your fruit you'll know you. Oh yeah, it can look real good. They can claim this, and what's the fruit? And so the fruit can be tested and evaluated. So the fruit is what's between the noon and the somic, and then the pay that you're going to eat your fruit. A man's way is returned on his own head. The cup of wrath that the great whore of Babylon made everybody else drink. Thank you, Inquisition of the church. She's going to be having to drink. That's the pay, drinking the fruit of the grape wine ion. The fruit with the seed, pay the mouth. If the ion is the fruit of application, fruit of the engaged struggle formed by nooning, can be evaluated for fitness, adequacy, content, essence, usefulness, integrity, virtue, weighed, measured for value, then pay. Each must drink the wine of his own fruit, his own way returned upon his own head, which is the word fakad, pay kuf dalit, visiting the iniquity, as Yahweh said, or like the one who says, a parable, he gave the talents, he says, come back and tell me what you did. That's pay kuf dalit. Pass in review and then being given according to what you've done. So this is all New Testament as well as Old Testament, apostolic writings as well as Tanakh. It's just the way the kingdom operates. Zodi, circumstances in life are the sprout of your own ways. And then you could say, why am I enduring this? Why? There's no freaking way that I did this to myself. But if he says, look, at the way that this works is you get what's coming to you. Yes, others throw stuff on you, but how do you then transform anything? It's got to be built into the alphabet. If somebody gives you a nasty, rotten offense, there's got to be some way that he gave us to turn it around. Yeah, you can forgive them. You can pray for them. You can say, Yahweh bless that. How do we turn it around? How do we take a bad thing and make it good? Saying thank you, that's number one. Saying hodu, that's number two. Saying please bless, that's number three. I hate this, admit the truth, but please fix this, please help this. Say that's number four. And then what do we do? Well, what did he say? It's got to be in there. It's got to be in the Torah. Find what to do. And because what we do is nooning what was put in us, mem, because of the kaf and lamed, and then we're building something somic, and what's going to happen is zadi. What is done in the grave, boom, bursts out zadi, that Aaron's rod that budded, and that zadi is a manifestation of what we do regarding his stuff in ourselves. And if we believe that, because it has to be that, because that's what the letters say, then when Yeshua said, I'm willing to suffer this cross, why? There's a couple really interesting things if you look at these words, which I don't have time for right now, but one of the things that has to do with he bought the deed of what we bought by sinning. When for him to come and die, that's another, we'll probably have to get into next week. But I found a really interesting word that basically he bought the debt. How do you buy the debt? We incurred a debt, death, going burning in hell. And by him going and doing that, he says, I'm taking on this. It's kind of like if you run up credit and you can't pay your bill, and so the creditors give you to the let's say the enforcers, and the enforcers come with sticks to beat you up with, and you go, oh, come on. And then somebody steps in and says, listen, I'll buy the debt. I'm gonna pay you guys, the creditor, off. Now he's my servant. I'll beat him up if he doesn't pay me. And you go, oh, thank you for absolving me. Oh, you're not absolved. I own your debt now. You owe me for your life. And if you want anything, you better do what I say. That's kind of what Yeshua did. You better do what I say because I now own your life. I'm not going to do what you say. I'm absolved. I'm free. No, you're free from that oppressor, but now I'm your oppressor. And it's like, yeah, come on, Well, didn't Yeshua say at one time, I forget where it is, he says, bring those here who didn't want me to rule over them and kill them in front of me? Yeah. What? What does it mean for him to rule over us with a rod of iron? We better do what he says. He says, oh, what's he going to say? Torah, everything his father said. Like it or not, we may think, oh, I'm free by the blood of Jesus. I'm absolved of my sins. And it's like, oh, that's not the way it works. We're obligated to keep the Torah. Everything Yahweh said we will hear and where we will do, that's the vow. And Yeshua doesn't represent any vow other than that. And Yeshua is going to be the enforcer of that vow rather than saying the devil and whoever else can torment you if you don't keep the vow. But he's not going to be an easier pushover no matter what we've been taught. Do I believe that? Do I think he's going to be that guy? It's in the words. Anyway, if the Zadi is the circumstances of our life that we have brought on because of all this other stuff, Kuf, rise up as this overview. If Zadi, if I'm saying that Zadi sprouts out of Pei, but Kuf explains what's in between, there's this overview, this way of seeing. Well, Daniel was told to Bet Mem Resh Aleph Hey. That's a Kuf view, a bima of Resh Aleph Hey of exhibition. To get this overview, that's the Kuf view. If I study what the letter Kuf is and study what Daniel was told to do, comprehend this is how this place works. Then this overview, am I harvesting my own crop? I'm harvesting my own crop? Or is it generational curse? Is it national heritage? Well, if I'm harvesting my own crop, then somehow I'm also imbued with the ability to modify the crop, to do something about the crop. By my words, by my heart, that's what he gave us, by walking in his ways. If I sit down on Shabbat and walk in the Moedim, it ought to empower me into a way that there's no other way to be so empowered. That's what he gave Israel. Such that if I just do what he said with the right heart, the right attitude, the right words, why, that's the Resh status. It's been the Resh status all along. So to rise up with the overview, the Kuf between Pei and Zadi, then between what's the Kuf and Zadi, how does that one who sprouts a wing get airborne? That's described by Resh. And then Shin, authority, power, exercised successfully in the mode. Resh Shin is to be authorized. The last thing Yeshua said before he took off, Matthew 28:18, all power and authority is given to me in heaven and earth. Again, he's the quintessential iconic archetype, but he also says, hey, walk in my ways, and what's mine is yours if we walk in his ways. That's the Torah. We were never told that. Wow, that's right, but that's what it is. It's always been. And then Tav explaining what's between Resh and Shin. Resh in swing at capacity, operating in full mode. Well, then that's the upshot of the whole thing. Well, that's what it's always been. So if we go back and say, okay, let's say I'm going to look at the 7 seals. The first seal is the white horse. Oh, that's the C virus with the crown, and that's the white coats of the scientists and the doctors and the blah, 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 the priests. And it's like, wait a minute. No, that's the way people have been looking at it who don't know these things. But if I look at it and say, in the Aramaic Peshitta here, it says the word white is chet vav resh, chor. But shin shin can also be white. Now, I don't know if it was shin shin or that's a translation from the word white in Greek or Latin. Well, it wouldn't be Latin, it'd probably be Greek. And it's like, well, so where do they, I don't know where they got that. But if I know Hebrew, I can say, no, I think of shin shin, the number 6 is rejoicing, and the crown, Khalil, Kaf Lamed Yod Lamed, that can be crown, but Kaf Lamed, Hey is the word for bride. Kaf Lamed Lamed is all or completely. So the crown is all or completely what? Well, Kuf Resh Nun is also horn, like a crown, like this prestige of learning how to read. So I can say, and he goes forth conquering and to conquer. And that word, to conquer, I believe was a Zion Kaf. In the Aramaic is Dalit Zion Kaf. Hey, wait a minute, conquering to conquer, that's pure and clean. Is it conquer? Is it overcomer? Is it victorious, or is it the pure and clean one? Pure and clean by what standard? The Resh man doing the Kaf stuff. The Torah. As he lamaded, was taught that he took in the seed and nooned unto Zadi, Natsar. Netzer. What's a Netzer? There's Nazarene and Netzer. Oh, that's the branch that sprouted from a stump that appeared long dead, and somehow the DNA of this olive tree can keep going. It'll be known as this branch of, it all fits. So if the white horse is not the bad guys, but it's us finally doing what he said, overcoming, because there's nothing that can squelch, because this isn't the revelation of the devil and the tribulation. This is the revealing of the otherwise unrevealed, like Daniel 9:23. This is the Bet Mem Resh Aleph Hey of the Aleph Tav Hey of the Bet Dalet Bet Resh, for the sake of Hey Bet Nun Chamodot, that's been desired. This is the warm mode. If you look at memchet, that's the word for butter, like butter. It's like, oh man, like butter. That's what Yahweh's promised his people all along. And they threw it away like it was pig fat. The detestable abomination. And they ate on purpose the detestable abomination, throwing away the Torah, because they were trained to think. We have been trained to think that that was better. So if I look at the word for red, Shin Kuf Resh, shriek. Shriek is a whistle, but red is also shani, which means different or variant. And if I say, well, the white horse, if I start there, that's the first seal. That I could look at 7 seals, Aleph through Zion, but I could look at the Mishkan pattern, Het Tet Yod, then Kaf Lamed, then Mem Nun. Het Tet Yod, if I take that as one white, this is the truth, finally pure and clear. That's the Aleph. This is him, his identity, the big white fence, blue, purple, red, and white, the embroidery colors. This is the kingdom. This is the reality of the kingdom. This is all this stuff we just talked about with looking through these 22 letters. That's the Aleph. That's the white horse. I'm equating then the Mishkan pattern with the Aleph through Zion, with the Het through Zadi, the Mishkan pattern with the Moedim, Pesach, I am your Elohim, you're my people, with the 7 seals. I'm trying to overlay all these things and say, what if we looked at it this way? Then something different. Oh, that's the red. Oh, that's with the sword. That's Shana. That's shrieking. And lining up with Kaf Lamed, the Torah, different than what? The Torah. That's the letter Bet. That's the other. That's the other who hasn't gimmeled with affection, but alienated with, I hate your stuff, like the prodigal son, before he became repentant of his rebellion. See, it all seems to line up and fit as a way of calculating and determining what's he trying to tell us. And then 3, the black horse lining up with mem nun. Mem nun means to count. Means what? What is this? Where does this come from? That's the scales of balance. Lines up with the gimel. It's like, what's the nature of the tether? Measuring the trickery. What did he say? Is it in English? Is it in Hebrew? If I go to look at the 7 churches, that also fits this pattern, to say, well, what are the 7 matters? The in the interest of time, we could pick this up again next week, but in the interest of time, it's the 6th church, the 6th assembly. Well, the number 6, Aleph through Zion, is the number Vav, letter Vav. Vav lines up with, he's making a suggestion, grab a hold and make the connection, to take hold of what he said. Kuf het. Het kuf is a command. Het vav kuf is a rung on the ladder. Kuf het is to take hold. I tell you, depending on the type of ladder, if you don't take hold of that rung, you're going to fall off that ladder. You can see this correlation in the way the word's spelled one way or the other. But the idea, if the black horse, let's go back, is mem nun in the gimel, then the 5th horse, or the 4th horse, the green, is the letter Samik lining up with the Dalet, the 5th Ayin lining up with Hey, the 6th Pei lining up with Vav, and then the 7th, the Zadi lining up with Zion. Well, the interesting thing about the way the 7 seals work is that the 7th seal is actually, that's 7 trumpets. And as he goes through the list of 7 trumpets, it's the 7th trumpet, which is 7 thunders. And if you go through the 7 thunders, which he doesn't tell you what they are, it talks about seal up, don't write, raise right hand, swear by the living one, he's creator of all, the out of time. And then it says something about the mystery of Elohim is culminated. That's the word used in the translation of the Aramaic. And it says the resh Zion Hey, that's a word translated as mystery. And the word for culmination is Samik Bet Resh, which is found on page 434 of the Red Dictionary. The mystery of Elohim is culminated. What's the mystery of Elohim? Well, if you look in, was it Jeremiah 23? If they've been exposed to my mystery, the word is Amad Basodi, Ayin Mem Dalet, Bet Samik Vav Dalet Yod. Amad Basodi is known as the big mystery. But here it's Resh Zion, Hey, and for the fact that it's culminated as Saber, Samik Bet Resh, or Sabvar. Samik is an engineered structure like the menorah, like a skeleton. Bet Resh is the word bar, which is pure and clean, similar to Zach, Zion Kaf. But here, what do you think? What do you think about this stuff? What's your opinion? That's the word Samik Bet Resh. What do you think? What's your opinion? It means interpret, conjecture, explain, made clear, reasonable, hope, appearance, logical argument. The mystery of Elohim at the voice of the 7 thunders, after the 7th trump, after the 7th seal, the 7 of 7 of 7 of 7 is the Resh Zion. Razin, Resh Zion, is also prince, also being of the Resh status. The Resh status is one who Zion operates according to the vow, the Zion, of which the Shabbat is a symbol of. Rats. Oh, that's Resh Zadi. That means to run, like rats. Aleph Resh Zadi, earth, eretz. I will run, which also means volitional and proactive and happily, greedily, voraciously, enthusiastically. So the mystery of Elohim is for Israel to be the Resh status, enthusiastically, volitionally, with great zeal, with the seed of Yahuwah blending with his own personal DNA in the expression of bearing fruit of light and righteousness and victory and salvation, as if his consciousness was of a whole nother dimension of reality. And it all fits as the explained in these 22 letters. And to make that explainable, comprehensible for reasoning, well, that's what Daniel was told to do. Well, that's what it says to do in Revelation 10:7. The mystery of Elohim will be made sabar. Well, isn't that what we're doing right here? Wait a minute, but if the book of Revelation is written staged sequentially, where you have to start off and run through 7 seals, and the 7th seal gives you 7 trumpets, and the 7th trumpet gives you 7 thunders, which aren't be written, but there's a categorization of something about them, which ends up in the 7th position of being that the mystery, the razah of Elohim is Savar. And we're doing that now. What about all that other stuff? And so I remember hearing years ago that the book of Revelation might be this is going to happen, then this, then this, then this, like it's a chronological sequence, but maybe not. Maybe it's more of a swirling vortex that overlaps. Nobody knows. What I'm suggesting is that if we just look at the meanings of these letters, it all of a sudden looks like something way down there near the end of chapter 10, verse 7 is something we're doing right here, which might be at the beginning of the white horse. The Aleph position of Het Tet Yod saying, oh, whoa, this is the truth. Let's go forward, rejoicing, conquering. And that bow, like the Aleph, it's not we're shooting arrows at anybody, but the word bow is Kuf Shin Tet. It's also Kuf Shin Tav. Like the emerald rainbow, that word emerald, the rainbow above Yahweh's throne there in Revelation. Kuf Shin Tet means bow, but it also means to be adorned, decorated, to be able to fly straight, to be able to go straight, like the fletchings on the arrow. So the word bow is also the same exact word that would describe the fletchings on the arrow, which is to cause something to fly straight. And the whole idea of the Mishkan pattern, like fletchings on the arrow, which is the word for Chet Zadi. And he said, I think, didn't he say that his bow, like Judah's like his bow, and be filled with Ephraim, like the arrow. And what I'm saying, there's all these pictures that once your mind starts jumping on this track, you in your mind and your imagination can go here and there and fill the whole thing in with this incredible staging scenario. Bet Memresh Aleph Hey. But if we're not walking in Moedim, it all disappears. If we're not keeping the Shabbat, as a Resh man, the Zion disintegrates. He said, I told you in quietness and rest is your strength, but you said no. I told you you got to keep the Sabbath day. That's the quietness and rest. I told you just keep the Sabbath day. Just walk in my Moedim. Party hardy on these 7 occasions. And I'm your Elohim. And I'll blow out all the opposition for you. But you wouldn't have it. There's that verse that says, where Israel says, no, we're going to run on fast horses. And he says, okay, very well, you will run on fast horses. But I'm going to give your enemies faster horses. I'm going to bust your chops. You're not getting away with anything. No matter what you do to run, I'm going to have something out there to trip you while you're running. That's what it's going to be. That's what I'm going to do. Just so you know, that's the way it works. And when you fall down and go boom and you get a scratched knee, know you did it to yourself. I did it to you, but you did it to yourself by running from me instead of to me. The Torah. Keep the Torah. Do the Torah. So every one of those words of preaching and prophesying and professoring that tells us this stuff is bad, that tells us that the Torah is not for us, is no good, is Gnostic, is Kabbalah, is Judaizing, is whatever, is all your enemy lying to you. Okay. So then if I can sit here and say, if the first four seals are the four horses, the black horse holding scales of balance, that's a picture of Mishpat. What Yahweh said he meant. What he said is going to happen. That's Mishpat. That's the balancing of scales. A man's way is returned on his own head. Okay, and so what happens? And you look at the churches, and the only one church, the ecclesia, lines up with the pay and vav, mouth, connect, hold, grab. He said, keep my words. They don't deny my name. Hold fast. Pay my words. Vav, connect, hold fast. That's the only one of the 7 assemblies that he had good things to say, and all the other ones line up. At least in my imagination, I can see them line up with what he said, and it all fits. And then the last one, the 7th assembly, he says, "Behold, I stand at the door knocking." Well, how does that line up with the 7 trumpets? How does that line up with the Zion and the Zadi? If the Zadi lines up with the 7th of the Moed-im, that's Shemini Atzeret. But as a concept type, it's one of the 7, the 7th of the 7, which is the same as the Zion, the 7th of the 7, which is like the Sabbath day. There's 6 days of creation and the 7th day, Yom HaShabbat. Well, he didn't do anything on that day. Yes, he did. He made it the Shabbat. That's what he made. And if you don't do the Sabbath day, it doesn't work. What doesn't work? The covenant. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. Because it lines up in that position, then you could say, what's Shemini Atzeret? What's the Sabbath day? I'm standing at the door knocking. Hello? No, we don't get it. We don't want to get it. We find the Shabbat abhorrent. We find the Shabbat loathsome. We find the Shabbat a rude interruption of our week of accomplishment. Yeah, that's what I thought too. Until I realized Shabbat was him standing at the door knocking. How do you see what you see? How do you know what you don't know? Why the number 7? Because it's the great vow of vows. What's the Shabbat? The proof for listening to his voice and keeping the vow. So if you don't keep Shabbat, if you don't walk in the Moedim, you have not participated in the vow of vows, and you perpetuate the curse. You perpetuate the ruin of everything. And the 5th seal, how long before you repay our blood? How long? And the interesting thing about that in the Aramaic is that it was the word nun samic bet, and then, gosh, I can't read this. Eyes are messed up here. Oh, and Zadi Dalit Hey Resh. Well, nun samic bet, remember that's the word we looked at with how do you turn things around? How do you cause the change? And then the word is insolent, malicious breach. The people in the 5th assembly, he said, wake up and turn the malicious, insolent breach. The only church assembly that could be changing an insolent, maliciously contrary breach is to say we hate the idea of Shabbat and the Moedim and that name. Breaking the vow is the malicious, insolent breach. And the only way to turn around is to go back to the vow of vows, the Shevaim, the great vow, and do what he said, which we can do. He's equipped us and given us the key, the means to change the whole thing. Do what he said. Anyway, I think we're near the time of the end here, aren't we, Carla?
Yeah.
2:34. And so I suggest, once again, that this is the time of year. Some people are doing Pesach presently, and some people a week or two ago, and that they're eating unleavened bread, or they're counting the 50 days. And it's like, do that. Do those three things. The Pesach meal, the week of unleavened bread, and the counting to 50. That's engaging this Moedim of this season. Okay, so anyway, here we are. I guess we're out of time. You can close it off, and then we can talk afterwards if you'd like.
All right. Well, Abba, once again, we praise thee and we thank thee for bringing us together, for having us with thee, and for guiding us, Abba, in thy words. B'Hashem Yahusha. Amen.